Okay, bore da chroeso. Good morning and welcome to this multi-location meeting of Environment, Regeneration and Street Scene Services Scrutiny Committee on the 10th of January 2023. I'm Councillor Sean Percy. I'll be chairing this meeting today. Please ensure your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting as usual, and if you wish to speak, please raise your hand electronically or in the chamber and you'll be called to speak. Members, it's with great sadness I report the passing of Councillor Sheila Penry, a member of this committee and a former chair of the Street Scene Committee. I'd ask members to please observe a minute silence before we start the meeting as a mark of respect. Members will have an opportunity to pay tribute to Sheila at the next full council meeting. Diolch, thank you. So for the purposes of declarations today, I would like to confirm that we'll be scrutinising item 3, which is consultation on the 2024-2025 budget proposals on pages 3 to 72. And in relation to item 3, we have been advised that items listed as ENV 21, 22 and 23 will be considered under the Education, Skills and Wellbeing Committee, which I think has already taken place this week, and not under this committee, and likewise actually for part of ENV 20, which we've discussed in pre-briefing. So I'll move on now to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest?
I have a declaration of interest on ENV 7, Knoll Country Park. It might work, sir.
Thanks, Tim.
Personal.
Officers will make sure we've got a form to fill out for that. Any other declarations from members? Okay, I can't see any as usual. If one occurs during the meeting, please let us know. Okay, so we'll now move on to agenda item 3, consultation on the budget proposals. So just to make everybody aware, your comments from this meeting will form part of the formal consultation response for the budget. So members are reminded that any suggestions or ideas that are put forward can be included within that during this meeting discussion as well. So I'll now before I take questions from members, I'll go to officers. And I think Nicola's going to introduce the report before heads of service will run us through the proposals. Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. What we thought we would do is just run through the general proposals that we were proposing, or that we have been undertaking to try and drive down our costs and secure savings first. And then for those that aren't covered under the strategic savings proposals that we've been pursuing, we'll take you line by line briefly through each of the proposals which are identified in Appendix 4 of your report. So we've been working behind the scenes on this since March of last year because we were aware of how significant the budget position for this authority was likely to be. And unfortunately, we weren't wrong. And actually, it is slightly worse than we feared because we had less than we were hoping for from the Welsh Government in terms of the settlement for last year. So fortunately, we started preparing very early to try and avoid some of the cuts that some of the other authorities are currently consulting on. So within the report and in other briefings that we've undertaken previously, you'll be aware that we've been pursuing sort of strategic saving solutions, and we've been doing that to try and avoid the salami slicing of budgets within individual directorates, which is what we have done in previous periods of austerity. So we've cut percentages off everybody's budgets regardless of the types of services they have delivered. So we try to avoid that this year by pursuing these strategic saving solutions. So I'll run through those solutions with you now. However, it's fair to say that despite the best efforts of staff who've been working very hard behind the scenes, the amount of savings that we identified could be deliverable were insufficient to deliver a balanced budget for next year. So despite the fact that we didn't want to go there, we have had to look for percentage savings cuts within each of the directorates. So it was identified that we should be pursuing about 2% budget cuts within each service on top of the savings strategy figures. So for our directorate, so for environment, that amounted to £925,000 on top of what we had already identified. So I'll run through those strategic saving solutions. We'll then go to the individual lines in Appendix 4. However, I wasn't proposing that heads of service repeat those lines which fall within the the strategic saving strategies. But so for example, accommodation is one of them. So we were not proposing to go through the accommodation lines within the table in Appendix 4. However, if members have got specific questions, then we're more than happy to answer those. We just didn't want to duplicate effort. So in terms of the strategic saving strategies, members will be aware we've been pursuing an accommodation strategy. So we've been trying to reduce the accommodation assets that we currently operate within. And we've also been trying to make improvements to the accommodation that we are proposing to retain. It's fair to say that that piece of work is still in process, and it will be for a number of years to come. So in terms of some of the outlying buildings which are in phase 1, you've previously been advised of the reduction of those buildings which have already been delivered. So we have either repurposed or sold or are in the process of marketing some of those buildings which were in phase 1. We're currently in phase 2, and that involves buildings such as Tregellis Court, which members will be aware is where we operate our fleet repair garage from. So all of our vehicles go to that facility for maintenance and repair, and we also operate an MOT service for taxis and our own fleet. So that's where that facility is located, and the Western Bay Adoption Service is also located in that building, as well as our building services and lighting team. So it will be proposed that we will be vacating that building in time, albeit the repair garage will have to remain there, because we cannot move the repair garage until we have completed our fleet strategy, because depending on which way our fleet transitions going forward will depend on what type of garage we require going forward. So for example, if we are transitioning our fleet to low emission vehicles, whether it be hydrogen or electric, then we don't want to build a garage which is capable of repairing fossil fueled vehicles. So that I'm oversimplifying it there, but we need to make those decisions as a consequence of those reviews before we decide on when we're moving that facility from Tregellis Court. But Tregellis Court, most of the services apart from the garage are going to be relocated to other existing facilities, primarily down to the SRC next to the quays in Baglan. There are other proposals that we are pursuing. We are occupying, or we've been undertaking a pilot within the quays to reduce the occupation of the building. So we've moved all staff from the top floor and the ground floor to the middle floor to see whether or not we can operate and in the same efficient way on a smaller footprint, which will require us to utilise less energy. If that is effective, then we potentially could look about moving other services into that building that are currently located in outlying buildings. And we could also look about co-locating other public service organisations within that building. Now, we haven't had any serious discussions or agreements on that, but there is definitely interest despite us not marketing that opportunity at the moment. So we could secure income generation from the co-location of public services within our existing assets. And that is something that we are also pursuing under the accommodation strategy. We're also looking at how we can repurpose, as I say, some of our other assets, and that work is ongoing. We're having to undertake that work in conjunction with some of the other project work we're doing. So, for example, we've secured LEF money for the renovation and refurbishment of the theatre, which is based in Talbot Civic Centre, so the Princess Royal. So can we undertake any other work to improve the remainder of this building at that same time? And if we do the works to this building at the same time, that may drive down costs. We haven't gone into any detail on that yet because the LEF decision is very fresh. We only found out towards the end of last year, so we need to tie up those pieces of works to ideally drive down the cost and get a better return on our investment. So there are, the accommodation work is not going to be something that we are going to undertake within the next month, 2 months, even the next 6 months. It's going to be a long-term programme of works because we still need to deliver all the services that the public are still expecting from us while that accommodation strategy is being implemented. So the other strategic solution, saving solution we pursued is energy reduction and transition to renewable energy. So members will be aware that inflation has significantly increased our energy bill up to about £14 million. And that came from about a £3 million level about 2 years ago. So the hike in costs is astronomical and is not sustainable going forward. So we've been looking at the building management systems that are operational in our buildings to make those buildings far more efficient in terms of their use. So we've also been looking at changing the lighting within those buildings, so going to LED lights, and they make considerable savings. And we've also been securing grant and, when the business case stacks up, using our own capital to install renewable energy generating infrastructure so that we're not drawing energy off the grid and paying the energy providers for that electricity. So we're driving down those costs. We're also been doing a lot of promotion work to try and change people's behaviour by turning lights off, etc. You know, those simple things, but all combined, they are also driving down our energy costs. I mentioned earlier on the fleet review. My colleague Dave Griffiths, who is on his way, the M4 has closed apparently, so he is struggling to get in, but he has been pursuing the fleet review. So we're looking at what vehicles we've got, how well used are they, can we use them differently, can we double shift those vehicles, for example, and if that is possible, how do we do that to try and drive down the number of vehicles that we have and the costs of running them. So that fleet review is underway at the moment. We've also been supporting the home to school transport review. Whilst education run the home to school transport service, it's actually organised and delivered by or commissioned by colleagues who work for Dave Griffiths. So he has been managing the home to school transport review to try and drive down those costs in conjunction with our education colleagues. In addition to that, we are currently out to consultation on the street lighting review. Some of the proposals that are part of that consultation is that we trim the lights, we dim the lights, and we also consider part-time night lighting. And again, that is to drive down our energy costs and our carbon footprint. We're not turning the lights off everywhere. and we're not proposing to do that. We are mindful of the impact upon safety and potentially crime. So that is why we're doing a consultation exercise at the moment, which will be concluding at the end of this month. So when we have a better understanding of the opinions of the public, then we'll consider that further. But we are currently exceeding our street lighting budget on an annual basis by £300,000 at the moment. So we have to take action to address that current pressure and reduce our energy costs going forward in any event. We've also been looking at fees and charges across the directorate. Some members will be aware, and I think this was a report that was scrutinised quite extensively in relation to car parking charges, which are always a very sort of unpopular subject for us and for the general public. So we finally agreed changes to the car parking charges, but we've been doing work in terms of fees and charges generally. And what we've been doing is benchmarking against other authorities, identifying those fees and charges which are probably much lower than customers can reasonably expect to pay, especially those larger customers such as private developers who are currently paying for pre-application advice and have the ability to pay significantly more than we are currently charging. So we've been looking at that. And we've also been looking at grant income. Can we increase our grant income, and can we utilise, in accordance with the grant criteria, can we cover the costs of some of the staff that are involved in delivering the projects which are subject to those grant applications from the grants themselves. So we've done it historically, and it's fair to say we probably haven't done it as much as we should have and can do. So we are making sure that we are maximising the ability to draw down on those grants to cover the costs of implementing those grants. So we've been doing all of that in the background, and despite all the efforts that have been undertaken, they, as I mentioned earlier on, they were insufficient to plug that gap. So all directorates were asked then to identify 2% saving cuts on top of that. So for us, that 2% is £925,000 per year. It's fair to say that it was a very, very difficult situation that we were in, and officers found it very, very difficult to identify those savings cuts beyond the savings strategies that we had previously been working on. Our directorate is under huge demand at the moment. We've got significant numbers of projects which we are being expected to deliver. So we've got 3 major left projects which have got individual components. We've got the Freeport and we've got a number of big city deal projects. We've also got enhanced business interest in this area. We've got ageing assets which require responding to. We've also got problems in terms of drainage assets being unfit for purpose, and then we're having to deal with all the flooding associated with them. So those are some of the areas that we are currently responding to. In previous years of austerity, we have cut the size of the workforce within our directorate, and I think it was acknowledged a few years ago that it was probably a cut too far because we were not able to provide the response that we all wanted to provide as a council to the public. We have slowly built up some of that workforce within the directorate, but it's still insufficient to deliver the demands from the public. So it was a very, very difficult task for us to do, to try and identify those 2% savings. But officers have done their best, and those are within Appendix 4. And I will shortly be referring to each of the heads of service to take you through those individual lines. Now, I don't propose to take you through the lines that the chair mentioned earlier on, because they were covered under the education and leisure scrutiny. And we were also not proposing to take you through the lines relating to the savings linked to the strategic savings that I've just mentioned. I don't know if I've overcomplicated that sentence, but I'm hoping you get the drift. We're not going to go into every line on accommodation, for example, because I've just sort of given you an overview. However, if there are any lines that you want more detail on that we haven't sufficiently covered, we're more than happy to take further questions or go through it in more detail. We appreciate that we've had a number of questions submitted to us in advance of this meeting, and we'll cover them as we go through the lines, and any that aren't covered we can mop up towards the end. So on that basis, Chair, I'll hand over to the heads of service that are here, and we'll take members through those lines in Appendix 4, which start on page 33 of the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola, for the introduction there. Just before we go over to the head of service, there is a question on ENV1, which was one of the strategic items you mentioned in your overview. So shall we take that first before we go over to the head of service? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Tim, you've got that, haven't you?
Yeah, thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Evan. This question is on behalf of Neath and John, and the question he's asking: are we engaging with our planning colleagues to identify opportunities to increase the value of those estates by selling our buildings and land with planning permission?
Yeah. Yes, we always do that. So we've got a very close relationship between our estates team and between our planning officers. So it's clear that if we've got planning permission for alternative use, that is going to inflate the price that we can secure for that asset. So that is something we will always do. There are constraints associated with it, with some buildings, and in relation to Tregellis Court, it is in a floodplain. So I know that Councillor Nathan Goldip-John has talked about CARPs, which are community adaptation and resilience plans. Sorry, I'm not as au fait with all the planning terminology as I used to be. So good job, I've got my colleague here, Kerry. And that is not a reason why you can build in a floodplain. They don't allow you to just do what you want just because you've got the opportunity to do those. You've still got to mitigate the impact of flooding, and there will still be uses that you cannot put in a floodplain, even if you've got a CARP in place. So what we will do is, when we are ready to release that building or the land, we will establish what the best use is for that site, what we can get planning permission, which will provide the best support for the community and for our economy, and possibly for our housing requirements and for our budget. So all of those issues will be weighed up, and we'll make the right decision for the council at that time based on those issues. I don't know if there's anything I haven't covered under that. No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm assuming one of the head of service now is going to pick up. Is it Simon first, I think?
Yeah, in column 3 of each of the in the table for each of the savings, they're all in order. So we've got savings from Simon, then Mike, then Dave, and then come in last is Kerry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll pick up the first one for me, which is ENV 25. So I got a different list. Okay. Sorry, ENV what? So where are we now? So we've done ENV 1 and 2 and 3. And so the first one I'm picking up is the metal box. Okay, we acquired this building probably around about 5 or 6 years ago. We were lucky enough to secure some funding from Welsh Government, refurbished all the offices to the front of it. And on the day that we bought it, we also flipped half of it we sold half of it to Hales, which allowed them to expand and increase the number of jobs they were able to provide within the area. We've had a long desire really to subdivide the remaining industrial space at the back of the offices. for two reasons. One is that obviously otherwise it's standing idle because it's not in a position at the moment where we can let it. It's around about 170,000 square feet, I think, off the top of my head. So which is too big for an individual occupier, but could be subdivided and provide accommodation for local companies. We have a number of local companies who were in the front of the building who were very interested in having space at the rear. We had built up a pot of money to do that, but unfortunately that has been used for the reserves and to balance the books this year. So we are a bit back to square one. We are currently looking to apply for grant funding to split up the remaining part of the rear of the building. And we've got an agreement in principle with an occupier for 50,000 square feet, and they're going to do all the works at their own expense. So we are working hard to ensure that the remainder of the building is occupied. We will need some grant funding to do that because we no longer have it within our budget unless I can speak very nicely to Hugh and he gives it to me at some point in the future. But we are working up those proposals. And in the meantime, we had, when we took over the building, there were significant antisocial behaviour problems down there. We had security guards in there because we had people who went in and stripped all of the electrical cabling out, for example. And it's high voltage cabling, so it's extremely dangerous, as you can imagine. It's not something that you would touch even if you're a qualified electrician, unless you're experienced in HV work. So we had to have security guards in there to protect the building at that point. We think now that we've got enough occupiers there, hopefully, and we'll be putting some other security measures in so we can start to reduce that security presence. And that's the first thing that we do. Obviously, in terms of the impact on the building, like everything, you run a higher risk of either arson or further theft, but we will try and put the other security measures in to mitigate against that.
Thanks, Simon. Do any members have any questions in relation to this item? Okay, I only have a brief one, and that's just in terms of the £185,000 saving that's in for the next financial year on the operating subsidy. Security obviously forms part of that. What other elements make up that saving or income for the next financial year?
That's predominantly security guard because of the threats that we had down there. And at one point, one of the security guards was sort of threatened with a machete. They would only work in pairs, as you can imagine. Well, at one stage they wanted 4, but we went back to 2. So it's quite a hefty insurance and security cost down there.
Okay, thank you. I think we can move on then if there's no other questions. So.
Okay, the next one is the City Deal program management saving. This is a one-off saving that's going to be a spread over a couple of years, I think, Hugh, is it? And it's because there was funds within the City Deal that weren't allocated, and so they weren't allocated to projects at that point as interest built up, so they were reallocated then to the individual authorities. So that is a one-off saving only.
Okay, I don't think, sorry.
Yeah, just to confirm, as it shows in the table, it's £142,000 saving next year. And as Simon said, it's one-off, which is why it's showing as a minus 142 in the following year. So it's actually been reversed. It's because it's just a one-off reimbursement of interest from the City Deal Programme Office. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for the clarity there. I can't see any questions either, Simon, so feel free to move on to the next item.
And the last one for me then is the reduction in cleaning posts. Obviously, as we reduce the number of buildings that we occupy, we're able to reduce those cleaning posts. And so they've been able to take out of the system. No job losses because we've reallocated roles to people where we had vacancies.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Any questions on that last item, ENV6? No, I can't see any there. So we move on then to Mike Roberts. Thank you, Simon. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. The first item, Knoll Country Park. If you just look at the description, I'm not quite sure where the last sentence on that has come from. This is a previously agreed proposal to put increased controls on the car park at the Knoll. And because we were then, having agreed that, we were then unexpectedly successful with the big LUF funding to redevelop the centre. And so that work has now been reprofiled to to be undertaken at the end of the Luff project. So when the centre's redeveloped and all the new parking and everything that there's done, the extra controls will go on the car parking at that time. So it's a reprofiling of a previously agreed saving. Street lighting. Sorry, do you want to?
I think there was a question, but I think it's been answered just in your explanation. Is that because you want the question, Tim?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes. So if you
Okay, sorry, I'll pause each one. Next one has been mentioned by the director, street lighting. Of course, there's been a report to this scrutiny committee that it's seen, and we're out to public consultation, which is running until the end of this month, 31st of January. And we'll be then bringing a report back to this committee, reporting the outcome of that consultation and making any recommendations. And of course, that will include an integrated impact assessment. So running slightly parallel with this process, and so any decision here today won't conclude the position with regard to this saving strategy. The next one, increase.
There are some questions on the street lighting item, so I'll take those now if that's okay. So first one is from Councillor Rob Wood.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I stated in an earlier meeting of the Scrutiny Committee when we went out to consultation that, you know, I totally disagree with this. I think it does put public safety at risk. The questions I have surrounding it, I mean, in the ward I represent, we had a fatality, a motoring fatality, only last week in the early hours of the morning. So, I mean, you know, timings that doesn't alter the threat to public safety. The question I have is, are we specifically consulting, have we spoken to the police and Thrive? Because obviously, you know, as a councillor, I'm worried about the effect that dimming lights and switching lights off. And as I've seen that Sandfields estate is particularly affected by this, you know, the safety of young women and girls in our community is my prime concern with this policy. So, you know, I just want to see that, have we had any response so far from the police and Thrive specifically? Never mind, you know, obviously it's going out to the public, the consultation, we'll see those at some stage. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Mike?
Yeah, the council manager for the lighting service has met with the police and members of the community safety partnership this week, and that work is continuing as part of the consultations. And as I understand it, the community safety partnership are pulling together a coordinated reply for the police and other partners who are involved in that. So that will come forward as part of the consultation responses to this committee as part of the report on the outcome of the consultations.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. The next question is from Councillor Wayne Carpenter. Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask the question whether or not the council has been forced to make switching off of lights and dimming of lights in the past, and what were the results of the dimming and the switching off at that time? Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. Mike?
I don't think the question has formally been asked about switching lights off in the past. There have been discussions in the past. It's not the first time we've had energy issues. Of course, we have invested a lot, I think, as set out in the report that came to this committee as part of going to consultation. You know, I think the electricity bill would have been 700,000 higher now if we hadn't done all the energy saving work that we've done. So we've done an awful lot of work on changing the switchgear, changing the types of lamps, putting in LEDs, putting in central control systems. So we've kind of exhausted. There's a lot of lamps already dimmed and some double dimmed. And we're now talking about dimming the sort of remaining, the sort of high energy LED lights that have now been put in under previous savings, and we're trying to get more savings out of previous improvements. So but it's not been formally considered before in terms of switching lights off.
Thank you. Tim?
This is a question on behalf of Nathan Goldip-John again. Is this a trial, or will this be baseline position going forward? Therefore, if it was decided to reinstate the lighting as before in 25-26, would we be looking for find an additional 300k in the budget?
Yeah, my understanding is that if it's that it will be a baseline adjustment. So if it was if the lights were dimmed or switched off part night, if there was a subsequent decision to put that back, of course there would be a budget pressure associated that then because there'd been a baseline adjustment. But if my colleague, the finance.
Yeah, that's correct, Mike. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I've got a question on this item as well. So just in relation to obviously investment, you mentioned there's been a lot of investment in the street lighting estate over the years, which I think we can all recognise. But is there a plan for further investment? The report that came to the committee previously kind of acknowledged we still do have a significant amount of lamps that are not LEDs, that are still fluorescent lamps, which can't be dimmed any further. So are there business cases being drawn up to invest in those in terms of which would allow us to make these savings without having an impact on residents?
There is Salix, basically interest-free loans available to the council, and we have submitted business cases and been successful and replaced all the lights where there is a business case that meets the requirement for that funding. So we've done all that. We've replaced all those lights. The fluorescent lights that we put in as part of our large-scale renewal, of course, over time, the cost of LED lights have come down. They're now a lot cheaper than they were, but the fluorescent lights we've put in, they're not that energy hungry, and so this is the actual benefit of changing to LEDs is quite marginal in terms of energy. So we are changing those. It's true to say that those lights now have become quite short-lived in there as everyone's moving on to LEDs, and the manufacturers are starting to stop making the fluorescents. So we've got a rolling program now over time where we are starting to replace those fluorescent lamps, and we cannibalize the ones we replace, and we use those for parts for all the other ones. So they will get changed over time, but on a slow process. But there isn't a business case. You know, we keep things under review with energy, but there isn't a business case to apply for the money to change those because the energy savings just aren't there.
Did you want to come in, Nicola? See you. Oh, but that's fine. I see you looking at me then. I'll just one brief sort of follow up on that. So just for clarity, that there was, you know, a relatively large scale replacement of the fluorescent lamps with LEDs in the Sandfields area quite recently. So was that done outside of the Salix programme and done in our own out of our own investment, or has the business case changed in the meantime?
Answer is it may have been, yes, done as our own renewal programme. I'd have to check the exact detail for you.
Okay, thank you. I've one indication left from Councillor Suzanne Patterson. Suzanne?
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, the question I wanted to ask was how much investigation into the safety of vehicles on roads where light dimming has happened, maybe in other areas, has been undertaken. I mean, I understand we're going out to consultation to see what the public feel about this, which is right and proper, but they're no experts, are they? You know, there might be one or two experts, but on the whole, where are we getting the safety aspect information on this? Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Mike?
Yeah, a couple of points there, Councillor. One is, of course, we did employ a consultant in coming up with the original proposals, and I think following on from the Scrutiny Committee, we have provided that consultant's report to all the members of the committee, and that sets out all the different aspects that were taken into account in coming up with the proposals. The other side, of course, we are consulting, as mentioned earlier in the meeting, consulting with the police, the Community Safety Partnership, Of course, the police, they are experts in that type of thing. Every time there's for example, a fatality, we do get a full report from the police setting out their sort of analysis of the situation and what were the contributory factors. So, you know, we have got a flow of information from people like the police.
Okay, thank you. I've got an indication now from Councillor Dacey as well. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. If you look online, there's quite varied reports about the doing of lights. And the ones I've read recently, you can have there's arguments sort of both ways, but mostly it says there isn't much effect on crime or antisocial behaviour. But I mean, if you look, it is varied, the reports, but I don't think a point really, but is it considered, and do we review it after we've made the decision? If we make the decision, do we see if there is a rise in antisocial behaviour, and then review the decision after a period of time?
In terms of dimming, of course, a lot of the lights are already dimmed, and they have been for a long time. So that's one thing I would say. I mean, it would be sensible to keep anything under review, to review any change after a period of time that's happened. And I think we just have to weigh up all the consultation responses that come in, and have a review at a point afterwards would probably be sensible.
Okay, I've got another indication from Councillor Sampadson. Sorry, sir, I didn't call you back after your response. And then...
That's so fine. That's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, and we okay with that response, Andrew, as well? Great. Okay. Thanks. So we'll move on now to the next item, which is ENV 9, I believe.
Yeah, so this is actually started some payback now from the council's investment in the remodelling at the transfer station. So as part of the internal remodelling and increasing our recycling capacity, we've also installed new sorting equipment. So that in the past, when our plastics and cans were coming in off the recycling vehicles, we were having to send them to somewhere else where they were being separated and processed. Now we do that ourselves. As this material comes off the truck, it goes through the sorting materials, is sorted to within the different waste streams, so the plastics, the steel and the aluminium particularly, and through that we are now getting much better income. So this has been delivered. Actually, the income level is now up, and so that I don't see any issues with delivering this. The money that we made this year, we put into the vehicle reserve because there was a gap between the amount in the renewal fund plus the amount Welsh Government are going to give us for the new recycling trucks and the cost of a recycling truck. So we put that money into the reserve, and we now balance the books there. So we've now got the money to buy the trucks. But that money then will now become a part of the savings plan from April.
Okay, I did have an indication from Councillor Cathy James on this item. Cathy?
Thanks, Chair. So just to clarify, this is not dependent on any increase in recycling rates or any changes to behaviour from residents. This is purely a return on investment that's been made by the council.
Yes, but of course, aside from this, we've got the waste strategy where we are trying to grow the amount of recycling, and where we do that, we're looking at reinvesting money into expanding the recycling. So that there's a side issue, but this money, the 400,000, this is being achieved now, and so it's associated with the sorting equipment that's been put in.
Okay, thanks. Because as I'm sure you're aware, there's been discussion online about changes to a 3-weekly bin collection, which is mentioned in one of the appendices as a suggestion. And I was wondering if this 400,000 was actually dependent on changes like that and changes to recycling rates. But you're saying no, it's not. Right. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that? Obviously, the saving that we're identifying under ENV9 is as a consequence of the improved sorting that we are able now to do. Now, because we haven't got contamination of different materials in one batch, we can secure a better price for that recycling, which is helping us to achieve that £400,000 income, additional income. Obviously, we have a waste strategy that we are currently pursuing, which has got a number of recommendations in there. Now, the waste strategy is aimed at pushing up recycling so that we can achieve that 70% Welsh Government target by 2024-25. Now, if we don't achieve that target, then we are potentially exposed to financial penalties. So there is obviously a requirement to do everything that we can to push up to achieve that 70% target. Now, the sort of indirect impact in relation to the savings target under ENV9 is if we have more recycling, which we are then able to sell onto different markets, then obviously we'll get an increased income over and above the current levels of recycling that we are processing through the transfer station. So there will be an indirect impact, but the direct impact, which is leading to that £400,000 saving, is associated with the improved sorting equipment. So I hope that gives you a bit of a rounded picture on how they all link together, really.
Is that okay, Kathy?
Yeah, that's great, thanks, and very interesting and actually very positive to know that the 400 isn't a potential maximum. Actually, that's almost a minimum, isn't it? And there could well be more income to come from there. So yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, I've got an indication as well. I see from Cabinet Member Councillor Scott Jones. Did you wish to make a comment, Scott?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Officers have partly answered it. I was going to ask officers, the Director of Head of Service, to give assurances to members that any such proposals around three-weekly collection isn't directly part of the current budget consultation, and any such proposals will be considered by this committee and the Cabinet Board further down the line. Thank you.
Could I ask a question for clarity then to either the Cabinet Member or the officer, that the current waste strategy that has been to this board does state we'll be consulting on three-weekly collections in this current financial year, so by the end of March, with an implementation date of next year. Is that still the plan?
Well, one thing you're due to get, and I know you've asked for it, there is due to come an update report on the whole of the Waste Strategy Action Plan delivery, so you'll be getting that. We have now completed all the detailed work to identify what the three-weekly collection would look like in terms of rounds and everything, and which is particularly important for the internal side of the consultation with our trade union colleagues who want to know how many rounds and how many jobs and all that type of thing. So we've now got that ready. Of course, there's been a lot of work with a lot of things like finance, so I'd have to look at exactly when we can, but we are intending to still do the consultation. But I think just to confirm, which was you'd asked for, reducing the frequency of the residual waste does not form part of the budget proposals or the budget consultation, but it is part of the agreed waste strategy that we've looked at to be implemented if necessary in order to achieve the 70% recycling and to avoid the fines and the reputational damage and everything that goes with that. So and we did, I know there was a lot of debate in this scrutiny committee that we didn't want to, that we need to start that consultation as soon as we can, because there's always a feed in time to go through those processes, as we found, getting all the information together and everything and being ready to do it. And then there'll be a time scale to do that, and then they'll have to be reporting back to yourselves. So that's why we've had to start it, so that we can complete that consultation, so that if we need to move to three-weekly collection, then we could do that. But obviously that would all be subject to to future decisions. And of course, I'm sure we're all very closely got our eye on the performance figures, and we're all trying to do our best to get those up, and the other elements of the action plan that are all going forward. So I'm sure we'll all be keen to see those, and obviously if we can all work together with the public and everybody, and we can get to 70%, then that takes the pressure off us all having to make changes. So which would be great.
Okay, so if I take that correctly, then the plan is still to go ahead with the consultation this financial year, as included in the waste strategy, but any positive financial impacts, if that was progressed with next financial year, haven't been included in the budget. So as Nicola's just sort of outlined that, and Mike outlined as well, any increases in recycling that might result of that haven't been built into this, and they would be a bonus effectively if that did happen.
Yeah, well, just a couple of points of clarification. Of course, any savings associated with it, the plan is to reinvest those in expanded recycling services. So they wouldn't be making savings by going to 3 weekly collections, because we'd be reinvesting that money and expanding the recycling services. Yes, there's a potential, if we grow the recycling, to grow the income, which I think was the point that the councillor was making. But of course, on the other hand, recycling rates can go up and down a bit. So I have to be very careful in saying to you, well, yeah, recycling may grow, but the rate we get might not necessarily say exactly the same. So there's a sort of balancing act for me to do in what I present to you.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
And I think the idea would be to do the consultation as soon as we can. If we can, it might drift into the start of the next financial year.
Okay, that's great. Scott, did you wish to say anything else before we move on?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Only briefly, just to thank the officers for clarifying that. It's been made absolutely abundantly clear that it doesn't form part of this current budget consultation, as what is put out there online, unfortunately, saying that we are going to 3 weekly collections. And until such time that myself and my cabinet colleagues make a decision, then we leave that decision for further down the line. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Scott. I've got an indication from Councillor Sarah Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, on this note, I wanted to ask a question about that, but really about the entirety of Appendix 5, because it all says that it's 2023-2024 budget suggestions. So I'm a little confused by why they're included if they don't form part of the budget proposal. And could I get some clarity on that, please? Like the whole of Appendix 5.
Yeah, I think it's that's fine to take that at this point. Who did you wish to clarify?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Just to come in there, yeah, we thought it would be helpful for members to see what had happened with some of the suggestions that came forward late in the day, which were too late to consider for 23-24. So we thought it would be helpful to have a schedule to say, well, this is what came forward last year. This is what officers have done. These are the ones we are taking forward. These are the ones we're not, and the reasons we're not taking them forward. So I'm apologies for the confusion. They was just there sort of for a information item, really, in terms of what was proposed last year. I hope that's helpful, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks. Sarah, did you wish to come back?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
I would say it might be a little confusing to members of the public, because I mean, this was part of what was put out, wasn't it? So I mean, if they're seeing it, that, like, if I'm confused, and I've been on council a little while now, I mean, members of the public are going to be very confused if they're reading that.
Yeah, Nicola.
Just to add to what Hugh was mentioned, I think we've had sort of criticisms from some officers and some members of the public as to why proposals that they put, or suggestions that they put forward previously, haven't gone anywhere. So I think the aim of that appendix was just to indicate we didn't ignore them. They were considered, and this is what has happened as a consequence. So we did listen, and this is what we did, and this is why we dismissed them if we did, and this is how they've been being incorporated into some of our other saving strategies if they were good ideas that would actually secure savings. So it was just to sort of square off that process, really, tie it up.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any other indications, so we move on now to the next item, because I've lost track of which number we're on. Number 10, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is some more payback effectively. The solar roof on the transfer station is now fully operational. So these are some savings now that are being realised associated with that solar roof, which is now driving, a lot the sorting equipment and everything that's in the plant. So again, this is a saving that is achievable and is now being achieved.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from members on this one? No, I can't see any there. So we move on to ENV 11.
Yeah, this one I'm picking up on feedback from members previously about breakages of bins. Two aspects. So we've been looking into this quite a bit. There's two aspects. One is a few years ago when we were trying different designs, we went through a process of what was called people remember the badger-proof bins, the ones with the button on the top, which actually were more secure in terms of animals getting in. Well, they were more secure, but they were less robust. And we've done a few trials now where when we're getting reports from people that they need a new bin, as well as giving them, we're collecting the old ones and seeing what exactly the damage is. And the large majority of the bins that have got damage are these old badger-proof bins, which are slowly working their way out of the system. The other side of it is we've now remapped all the rounds as part of working towards implementing the data system under the waste strategy, and all that's put in, and now we can correlate all the complaints that come in exactly to the rounds and the crews. And so we have a hit parade of where they come in and the crews, and we are tackling the crews where we've got a higher incidence of damage. So through that, through the old bins working out of the system and the new management controls, we're expecting to make some savings in the damage that's been happening in terms of recycling equipment.
Thank you. I got indication from Councillor Rob Wood.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, you are quite correct as members that have been on the committee for some time. I mean, we've all witnessed that on collection day of the recycling, it can be like a Greek wedding out there, I mean, the recycling boxes get checked about. I had hoped that this 25,000, because as I say, it's not elaborated on in the line itself, had been around some sort of retraining strategy, because, the damage that the public, that members see is done by the handling of these receptacles. I mean, other than that, it's like you've alluded to, it's the quality of the recycling equipment. But what I find is the vagueness of this 25,000. How can you quantify that line as being 25,000? I mean, nobody knows how many items are getting broken, etc. And as I say, without that sort of training or the introduction of new receptacles, I don't know how you're going to get that line exactly, whether it's going to be £1,000 saving or even not that, just by mapping routes. I can't see that. I just want to see more clarity in a line like that, because if you dig deep into this line, you'd be thinking, well, where is the evidence of the 25,000 exact saving on it? Thanks.
Okay, I'll take the question from Councillor Sarah Thomas as well, and then I'll go back to Mike. Sarah.
Thank you. So it was more of a sort of potentially helpful suggestion, really. I'm conscious that the bags, like in particular the battery bag, but I mean other bags as well, they often end up blowing away, particularly this time of year. And it might be a saving for council if they were to put something heavy in the bag, like a rock or something, and make sure that it sort of stays in place. Because a lot of the time when I've had to order replacement bags, it's been because they're just not there when I go to get them. And you look down the street, but they're nowhere to be found.
Okay, thank you. Mike.
Yeah, well, obviously the service manager has looked at this. We do know how many bins we buy, and we know how many we put out there, and we know we've got expanded information because we've also changed some of the questions in when people ring up and say, I need a bin. They can tell us that it now say, they now ask things like, is it to do with the crew, the behavior by the crew and that thing. So we've got that information. We are correlating those calls to the crews that are actually doing the work, and we've got a hit parade, and we are, you know, we are, if you want to talk it, re-educating, who's talking about, you know, the crews, you know, with the highest numbers. So, and there is an element, you know, the service manager has had to make a judgment, because some of these breakages are due to a type of bin that we purchased at one time, which have proved to not be robust, and we don't use those anymore, but they are still out there, and they are still working their way through the system. And so they are going to prove to be more fragile, unfortunately. So it's a two-pronged attack, though. It's a, you know, we're getting those out of the system, but also tackling the crews that aren't looking after the equipment as they should be. And just to pick up the other last point, I think, you know, obviously we've tried now, certainly on the bigger bags, we've put the weights in the bottom of the bags to stop them blowing around. I accept the point about the battery bag perhaps, and you know, I think again, under the waste strategy, we're looking at that, about whether we have a bigger bag and whether that incorporates the waste electrical items as well as the batteries. So that's something that's under examination as well. But
or even somewhere you could hook it onto the food waste bin or something, you know. It doesn't, because it's got a little like loop on it, hasn't it? So I mean, I'm not saying you have to issue new bags to everyone. I'm just trying to think of ways that it could help. I'm conscious I've lost battery bags numerous times because they're so small, and I always put a rock on it as well, but they don't always put it back on when they've emptied it. So
okay, thanks Sarah, thanks Mike. We'll move on now to ENV. I think well 12 and 13 are very much linked, so we'll move on to the next two. That's fine.
Agreement, a 5-year agreement that was entered into before local government reorganisation, so before 1996. And okay, I'm sorry, apparently my microphone wasn't on. So
yeah, if you just repeat,
I'm happy just to repeat that. So we're starting with the upper section. And I know there was a question that was submitted from Scrutiny about whether it could be legally done, and the answer is yes. And furthermore, notice has been given on the upper section, and that agreement has ended from the 31st of December 23. That followed a CEDG decision to take that action in order to protect the council's financial position. Now, historical position was that the license agreement was originally a 5-year agreement entered into by Neath Borough before local government reorganisation. And on expiry of that agreement, it was then carried over on a rolling annual basis, and that carried on until December 23. Now, the issue was that the owners of the canal had started to argue that the council was responsible for all long-term structural maintenance of the canal under the agreement, which, you know, you could imagine was probably never the intention when an original 5-year agreement was entered into by Neath Borough Council back in 1994. So we were in a position where, you know, and again, faced with all these allegations of potential multi-million-pound liabilities, that the corporate directors took the decision that it was necessary to, if we have you know, whether we have a new agreement for access in the future or not, but the current agreement as it stood could not continue because it placed unacceptable risks on the council's financial position. So that agreement has ended, and so that saving in there can be delivered. In terms of the lower section, Legal are currently checking on the termination rights of the agreement. Again, it's a short-term agreement entered into many years ago where the original period has expired, but it has been rolling forward on an annual basis. We have there are public access rights over the towpath for the related section of the canal, in return for which the council has to pay the owners of the canal in respect to a schedule of regular maintenance that they're supposed to do. So it's probably what we expect is a question of what is the reasonable notice period that needs to be given, and I'm awaiting feedback on from legal colleagues on that. Of course, that may lead then, depending on the notice period, to a part-year saving. But of course, we also then have a boat. We have the reed cutting boat, and there's an agreement of that with the owners of the canal where they utilise it for their sections of the canal on the basis that they also cut the bits that we need to do, and we can sell that boat, and that would probably make good anything in terms of any part-year saving. So it's a little bit of a complicated matter, but both of the savings, one is definitely deliverable and the other should be. The question is there a part-year saving in the first year?
Okay, thank you. Nicola, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just to add to that, Chair. We appreciate that the canal is an important community asset. We understand that members have raised a number of concerns, and when we've been discussing the proposals with the cabinet members, they've also expressed concerns. Now, we've mapped all the agreements that are in place along the length of the canal, and there is a combination of the licence agreement at the top end of the canal, which Mike has referred to, where we have, under that licence, we have the ability to use the canal for recreation and leisure purposes. So it's not just the towpath, it's the water body as well. Now, there is no reason why the canal owners can't continue to make available that asset for recreation and leisure purposes to any future users of that water body. What we don't want to do is to have to pay all the costs associated with repairing the locks, which are in a poor state of repair, and we considered historically that we are not, as a local authority, responsible for those. And that was never ever factored into the licence agreement by, it's never been factored into the implications of us continuing with the licence agreement to date until we've been presented in the last, probably the last 18 months with a request from the owners of the canal to undertake very significant, very expensive works of repair to their asset. And that is what is prompted us to terminate the licence agreement. So there's a licence agreement at the top. We have public rights of way along some elements of some parts of the towpath, which will enable the public to continue to access those parts of the towpath. And we have the public access agreement, which Mike also referred to, down the bottom end of the canal, down by Britain Ferry. There are gaps in the towpath where there are no agreements in place, but the public are continuing to use it. Now, if we terminate we have terminated the licence agreement. If we terminate the public access agreement, then officers will continue to negotiate with St Modwyn for a public access agreement to be put in place for the towpath, but rather than us paying St Modwyn to undertake any maintenance of that towpath in terms of clearance of overgrown vegetation, etc., then we will incorporate it into our maintenance and management plans. So we would do it under our existing works programme rather than paying somebody else to do it for us. So we will do our very best to ensure that access to that towpath continues, but we just need to drive down those costs and mitigate any financial and legal liabilities that have been threatened against the council. So that is the reason why we're doing all that, and those are the efforts we're making to try and mitigate any impacts upon access, continued access to that asset.
Okay, thanks both for the sort of outline for that. I'll come in first, I guess, with a question. Obviously, my main concern is in relation to the access to the towpath. given that it is currently an active travel route. And obviously, you'll be aware that public rights of way for walking do not give access for cycling either. So where there are public rights of way, that doesn't secure the use of the towpath for cycling. I guess my concern is sort of particularly with what's been outlined here is that we're going to terminate the agreement and then seek to negotiate something afterwards. And in that interim period, is there a risk that the owner of that towpath closes access to that towpath if there is no public access agreement to sections of it, or otherwise takes steps to perhaps stop cyclists if their only legal requirement is to maintain a public right of way? And my link question to that is, given that we've secured significant amounts of Welsh Government funding to develop the active travel route along that towpath, are we under any obligation to take reasonable steps to continue the license agreement having done that? Because that seems a little bit peculiar that we'd be allowed to spend a lot of grant money and then pull out of the license agreement that allows the public to use it.
The license agreement relates to the top part, so up towards the resolving, north of Abergawed. So that's where it's and it primarily relates. What the license agreement gives you over and above a public access agreement is access to the water body, so that there is an organisation up there that during the summer months they rent out paddle boards and kayaks.
Yeah, I think I'd probably just mix my terminology up there between public access agreement and license agreement, but I'm referring to public access agreement.
Yeah. Okay. So what we will be doing is negotiating with St Modwen for a public access agreement in place whereby we will maintain, as part of our ongoing maintenance programmes, the towpath and the towpath only. It is an important part of our active travel network. We acknowledge that. But the position that we're in is that the budget gap is so significant. We've had to look everywhere for savings. So we know that it's not an ideal situation. We would like to think that the owner, if they are going to be presented with an opportunity for somebody else to maintain their asset, which they would otherwise have to maintain themselves, they would look favourably upon that. But we cannot guarantee that we're going to get a positive outcome, but officers will do their very best behind the scenes to secure a positive outcome, because we acknowledge the importance the canal towpath has. And as I say, it's not a proposal that we put forward lightly. It is a proposal that has been suggested because the budget problem is so significant.
So just a point of clarity in terms of the liability concern is in relation to the license agreement that doesn't really affect access to the towpath on the active travel route. The decision on the active travel route towpath is purely a budgetary concern over the £35,000 that we're currently paying. So that's the decision we've taken to cut that £35,000, not because of the overarching liability, which I can totally understand, that the £100,000 license agreement on the upper part of the canal comes with it a huge larger liability. But for the towpath, actually, we've just gone, we need to trim £35,000 from the budget, and this is one of the options.
Yeah, you can see from our list of projects spans 2.5 pages, and some of them are very small sums of money. And that just goes to show how difficult it has been for officers within the directorate to identify savings to plug the budget gap. So we have, a pound here, a pound there, or, £1,000 here and there. It all adds up, and every budget saving proposal there is quite critical for us to close that budget gap. So effectively is we have been forced down this route because the budget problem is so hard. But as I've said, we will try and mitigate that through negotiation with the landowner, where we get a public access agreement where we don't have to pay somebody else to do the work for us. We will do the work ourselves.
Okay, so the risk is there at the moment until those negotiations are complete. We may lose access, we may not, is the current position. Okay. I think that also answered Councillor Goldif-John's question, didn't it, Tim? So did any other members have questions on this one? Sorry, Councillor Hurley, Cabinet Member.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just to add that there are obviously two private companies. One of the companies in particular, sitting on quite a large reserve, and obviously I've had years of benefit of the industrial use of the canal with local industries, but don't seem to want to put anything into it at the moment as a return. So, you know, I think it is time for them to sort of stand up and do things as well. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on now to the next item, which is EN 14.
Yeah, last one for me, Chair, thankfully. So this is, in a way, it's not new in as much as there's been a subsidy, if you like, to the work we've been doing for schools for some time. But previously, we managed to work things so that, you know, there was not above inflationary increases passported through to the schools. But again, we're back to this position now where, you know, we've raked over savings over the years. We've raked and raked over savings, and it's some of the same things from before keep coming back. And this is one where, you know, the neighbourhood services manager, they know exactly the resources that they deploy to the schools for all the grounds maintenance, and through they all have a different specification, and we're not, you know, recovering our costs from the schools. So we need to apply an above inflationary increase in order to bring the cost recovery from the schools back into line with actual costs.
Thank you. I've got a question on this one from Councillor Rob Wood. Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, you know, I know we're talking subsidies, and a similar budget line came up in another meeting the other day about it, about the way that the council was subsidising a service. You know, it's sad to see it go, because in a way, what we're doing here is we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. The schools are on the back foot. Their reserves have been wiped out. You know, to charge back to them, you know, this level, it's not a huge amount, but it could be a huge amount when you're talking of schools that haven't got that facility. And ideally, you know, what we are saying they could do is they could go to a private company now instead of the council, whereby they could get the service done cheaper. But would it be up to the standard that they currently get? And, you know, I always think that there's a risk then to the council service, in that if they all decided to do that, and they cut back, you're going to have grounds that are perhaps not as well kept as what they are now. You know, there will be a risk to it. I don't know your thoughts on it, but do you think there'd be that level of risk to the grounds of the school? Thanks, Chair.
My initial thoughts are, of course, and my colleague, Director of Finance, wise, you know, a good accountancy practice, costs should rest where they rest. You know, so the costs should go back to where they are, so that everybody actually knows what things are properly costing. And so from one perspective, the proper cost should go back to the proper place, so we know where our spend is and what is happening on. So I think some of the schools have gone to contractors before, and they've come back to us because they know we provide a good service. So you know, they would have to do that judgment. I mean, our costs are what our costs are, but we do provide a reliable service with, you know, all you know, vetted people and everything in good health and safety. So we do that, and potentially, you know, schools would have to take a judgment, but costs should go back to, you know, the right cost should go back to the right place, so that everyone knows what they're spending on specific things, you know.
Okay.
Sure. If I can just come back on that. I mean, the thing is, I mean, obviously, if the schools do start switching to private contractors, obviously it becomes a threat then to our employment and our levels of employment. Because if our grounds people who are currently doing it, you know, they don't have the work levels coming in, there is a risk. That's the point I was trying to get across. You know, if all the schools decide all of a sudden, oh, well, we were able to get it cheaper privately and a job done just as well. And it's quite rightly to say, yeah, the schools have it within their remit to do that. But I mean, there's a risk then to our employees if the work isn't coming in. Thanks.
I mean, there's something like 190 operational people in neighbourhood services, and just under natural turnover, you know, you can accommodate a certain amount of change, no problem, because, you know, we've an age workforce. There's people retiring and turning over all the time. So I wouldn't see any problem with accommodating any change if that happened.
Oh, sorry, members, I had my mic off there. I can't see any other questions or comments, so we'll move on to the next item, which is Dave's item, Learner Travel Wales measure. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Chair, and may I apologise to members joining the meeting late. The incident and the M4 was closed. Seems like I'm having a bad day because I cut myself shaving and I've lost digital connectivity as well. So hopefully that's my three things dealt with for today. Yeah, you'll see that I've got 5 saving lines here. They're fairly modest, low-cost savings, and that's predominantly, as Nicola mentioned, most of my staff are fee earning. So I've not got large budgets that I can easily trim back in any way. But the first one on the line there, EN 15, the Learner Travel Wales measure, the council made an allocation to our baseline budget a number of years ago when Welsh Government changed the Learner Travel Wales measure. And in simple terms, basically this meant a review of all of the safe routes within our communities, but particularly linked with schools. So we continually review and survey those safe routes in communities. The budget is split partly for a cost to support an officer in carrying out that activity, doing the surveys, visiting the schools, or addressing issues raised by the public or members associated with the safe routes. And the other element of the budget is for then carrying out small elements of work that get identified. So, for example, we may have some issues that weren't previously occurring en route, and there may have been a change in either traffic, parking, a development. So sometimes we go back in, do some protective measures on junctions. We've had examples of vehicles coming out on rear lanes and crossing the safe route, so we've had to put bollards in, some additional traffic regulation orders. So we're taking £7,000 off the works element, but we will still have £30,000 there to tackle issues on the highway network when they're raised with us. And the other fortunate thing is that Welsh Government this year, for next financial year, have reintroduced some capital grant that we're now able to bid for road safety work again. So any impact there, we should be able to offset against potential grant going forward. More generally on road safety, and I just wanted to mention this to the members. For those of you that might have seen the media press release this in the last week or so, really pleased to say that Neath Talbot has come out across Wales as having the safest roads in Wales. So we're the top ranked authority. So we were delighted with that. Sort of feedback and data. It was an independent assessment. Obviously, still more to do. We want, we'd continue to relentlessly secure a grant and try to improve road safety across the borough. So that's ENV 15. ENV. Oh, sorry. If there are any questions?
Yeah, we'll just pause briefly, but I can't see any indications. I'll just ask members, as we're going through, you can pop your hand up as the officers are speaking if you've got any questions, but we didn't have any pre-indicated, so you can move on this one. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So the next ENV 16, we've been sitting on a Welsh Government review of the fees and charges associated with the recently introduced sustainable urban drainage legislation that's been going for the last 2 years. So there's been a little bit of a review across, across Wales in terms of the introduction of SARB. And we've identified as part of that review some opportunities to introduce and improve the services that are offered around the pre-application service. So we did a bit of benchmarking with other local authorities who have introduced some fees and charges. So we're going to be suggesting that we increase our fees. It would generate, we've modelled roughly on the number of applications that it would, a modest fee of £9,000 across those applications. So we're aligning ourselves really with other local authorities and, you know, reviewing the new legislation.
Great. I can't see any questions on that one, so yeah, feel free to move on.
Okay. You'll notice on this one, again, it's in association with the raising of fees. The figure is to be confirmed. I can confirm that we've modelled that, and to the penny, it's £3,100 and 96p, so circa £3,000. Again, a very modest increase in the fees and charges. I know that there was a pre-question raised by Councillor Nathan Goldup John, where the query was, would this potentially put developers off from coming forward and developing with the borough? As I say, it's quite a small fee. I think the challenges for the developers within the authority are probably the cost of building materials now, and perhaps some of the adverse costs associated with developing some of the land that we have, which is in some areas contaminated. So I think that's where the challenges lie with trying to secure development in the borough.
Okay, thank you. Nicola, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Not just specifically on the line that Dave has just taken you through, but generally in terms of fees and charges, it has been already modelled as part of the work that Hugh has done, that there will be 7.5% increases unless otherwise specified across all of the fees and charges that we as a council require. So the figures in the table are for the income we can generate over and above the 7.5. So I don't want members to think that we double counting. So it's just a point of clarity, really.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you. I saw there were no further questions on this particular one either, so we'll move on to 18, please.
Okay. This line, again, very modest amount. This is associated with the work that our fleet garage undertake, where we enter into service level agreements with South Wales Trunk Road Agency and Titarian. We've got very good relationships with Titarian, and ever since the stock transfer took place, we've always maintained their vehicle fleet for them. There's been some changes, obviously, because we're going through the transition period now from diesel petrol vehicles to electric vehicles, and indeed they are also migrating their fleets. We've been reviewing those SLAs. So as I say, it's a small increase. All of the fees and charges I've got here are generating income from external sources, so we're not putting pressure on other parts of service areas. Yeah, so a small amount. I think they will retain our services, picking up the point that Councillor Wood said. We've retrained all of our fleet fitters now for servicing and maintaining electric vehicles, and they're not widely or readily available in the sector, and it would probably cost Sutra and Titarian a lot more money to take those vehicles further afield to be serviced. So we've had a discussion with them around that, and it seems that that's a reasonable and acceptable level of increase.
Okay, great. There's no indication, so yeah, please move on.
And then finally, I mentioned about the fee earning staff. Obviously, the engineering consultancy are wholly reliant upon earning fees from the capital programme or from securing grant elsewhere. We've been very fortunate in that you will be aware that recently we've had large grants approved in principle under LUF. So we were going to try and just tweak the multiplier very marginally so that we can recover some extra fees and target those against grants where possible. But also in parallel with this, if we've got capacity, I'm going to try and take on some more work. We've been recently approached by town councils if we can support them doing some design work. And if we can generate income to offset our overheads in that way, we'll obviously take those opportunities as well.
Okay, great. I can't see any questions from members, so thanks, Dave, for running us through those. Much appreciated. And over to Kerry now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just getting my mic to work there. Yeah, I've got 7 proposals which I'll quickly run through now. And as Nicola indicated at the outset, they are a mixture of cuts and the trimming of budgets, for want of a better phrase, and also income generation. Again, most of my proposals are all quite modest, but again, I think that probably reflects the fact that it's not the first time that these particular budget lines have been looked at and raided previously. So it reflects the difficulty that the service has had to try and find and contribute to the overall budget position as has been outlined. But the first one, ENV 20, or the element of ENV 20 that relates to this particular scrutiny is the Japanese knotweed management service. Now, this was a service that was introduced by the environmental health team a number of years ago. It's had quite good success over the years in terms of fee income. So we're looking to raise the fees and charges, and as Nicola said, and this is over and above the general uplift that's been outlined in the report, 7.5%. The service has provided sort of covers sort of visits, treatment, monitoring, and progress reporting as appropriate, depending on how many years these various schemes run through. And just again to clarify, this relates to private and domestic properties rather than the council-owned land. So I suppose with this one, the caveat, of course, is that any increase of fees may ultimately deter the public from engaging with the service. So we will monitor the take-up going forward, but ultimately this will be monitored to make sure that hopefully that this particular proposal isn't end up counterproductive.
Okay, thanks. So there is a pre-indication from Councillor Cathy James with a question on this one.
Thanks, Chair. Kerry has actually just answered my question because it was about the continued commercial viability if the fees are increased. So it's reassuring to know that it will be monitored. Thank you.
Yeah, my apologies, Cathy. Okay. Maybe if we want to move on, Kerry. I think the next few are the ones we're skipping, aren't we? 21, 22 and 23.
Yes, I think the next one for me now is ENV 24, which is, and this particular line, again, a modest sort of 9K. This is specifically relating to the professional fees budget that's aligned to the LDP team. Again, this is a further trimming. We have looked at this particular budget line before, and this particular budget line relates to the ability to commission external consultants to assist with the delivery of the LDP work programme. Members will be aware, of course, that the LDP work programme is very broad and varied, and sometimes we've not necessarily got the expertise fully in-house, and we do need to engage on occasions with external consultants. So this, to a degree, reduces the ability to do that. But again, hopefully this should be managed and going forward. But ultimately, this could again create that little bit of additional pressure on what is essentially quite a small team.
Okay, I've got no indications on this particular one, so yeah, please move on.
Okay, moving on into ENV 25, and this relates to the countryside and wildlife team, specifically the countryside team and the public rights of way maintenance budget. Again, a modest amount, but it is perhaps worth members noting that this particular budget line has been significantly cut in previous years, and it does again reduce the ability of the Countryside Access team to conduct maintenance work on the public rights of way network, which is, as members will be aware, I'm sure, quite extensive. The current budget line, if you include this particular trimming, amounts to a total of 33.5k in total. So that perhaps gives members an appreciation of, quite frankly, that's not a lot of money to deliver what needs to be delivered across the network. And I know quite often this is quite an emotive subject. We do sort of deal with a lot of complaints from the public, and indeed via you as members. So, given the budget as it is, we can't be proactive anyway. We're consistently being reactive to the queries and complaints that we do receive. So this, again, is just a further important for members to recognise that this is a further trimming of a budget.
Okay, I'll just call in Nicola, and then we have got a question on this one as well.
Yeah, just to mention, I know that we've brought this, as Kerry has indicated, this has been raided in the past and the budget has been reduced over time. We have had a number of members ask whether or not we can use voluntary organisations, community groups. I know our leader has mentioned it when he was in opposition. He used to bring it up when we were presenting these cuts in the past. We would encourage anybody to undertake any work in the community. However, if we were to rely on community groups, then we have a health and safety responsibility towards them. We would have to ensure that they were appropriately trained. And, because of the small size of that team, we would probably not be able to do it within the resources available. We've got 2 guys within the team who are currently out and about undertaking maintenance across the entire county borough. So if we've got those guys monitoring and managing voluntary groups, they wouldn't actually be able to do what they do at the moment. So we would probably require an additional pair of hands to do that, and that would counter the savings that we would secure from those voluntary groups. So we have considered it, but that's the position that we're in. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks both. We did have a brief discussion on this in the pre-briefing, and I'm sat on the predecessor committee to this with Councillor Hunt. Yeah, we've seen a few of these sort of trim-ins of this budget over the years. There was a question from Councillor Sarah Thomas. Sarah.
Thank you. So, I mean, you've kind of answered part of my question, which is what sort of impact is this going to have? But I am conscious, and just speaking from my own experience, there's a particularly bad ridge in one of our footpaths that has been reported over a year now, and it's not been fixed. And it's all good and well saving money on this, but I mean, at some point we could have liability of someone tripping and getting hurt and so on. So I'm a little concerned about how small this budget has become, given the extensive roads and footpaths and so on that we need to maintain on this. And I don't know, I feel like maybe we need to look at this again.
Thanks. I've got indication from Tim Bowen as well. I'll call Tim in before officers come back. Tim.
Yeah, just going back on the voluntary groups. How do the Friends of Margam Park, the Friends of the Knoll, how do they supervise? Have they got people in charge of them that are watching over what they're doing?
Okay, yeah, thanks. I was actually having the same thought now. That feels like a problem we could solve internally with some general capacity to manage community volunteering in our assets, but
I think that
a bit of an open question.
Kerry comes in relation to Councillor Sarah Thomas's query on that specific bridge. In terms of the Margam Park, Friends of Margam Park, obviously they are contained within a park, so there is a contained environment. And there are significant numbers of staff working in Margam Park that have regular engagement with that group. So there is constant supervision opportunities there. As I said earlier on, our rights of way, and I don't know the length of our rights of way, I'm sure we could find out, but they are, thousands of kilometres long, and we've got 2 guys. So we haven't got the team that they've got in Margam Park, and we haven't got the team of, the number of staff that we've got in the Knoll, which are less than Margam Park. It may well be a proposal in terms of trying to put sort of some community involvement scheme together in the future. But as a directorate for these particular assets, we haven't got that resource either in terms of staff or funding, I'm afraid. I don't know if I can pass on to Kerry then for the specific question that Councillor Thomas
Kerry.
raised.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, and thank you, Councillor Thomas. It's an important question, but just to clarify, in terms of, it's probably worthwhile making the distinction with the countryside and access budget that we're talking about. It's more about improvements to the surface of the public rights of way, vegetation cutback, etc. I think your question seems to relate more to potential structures that are on the rights of way network, and there is a separate budget line for that. So we're not proposing that budget line is limited as well, in the sense of, there's not enough to go around, in a sense, but we're not proposing to cut that particular budget. And it's probably also worth mentioning that depending on the size of the structures, I think the larger the structures, I think they're dealt with primarily by the street care service, whether the smaller structures are covered by the countryside and wildlife access team. So the first thing we would need to establish, really, in particular example that you've identified, is who owned, do we own it as a council in the first instance, and then who is the best team to deal with that particular structure. So I can come back to you separately on that if you've got a particular issue with a structure.
Just to be clear, I wasn't, if I can come back, it wasn't about that particular issue. It was more concern about the budget constraints, knowing that it's already stretched. So.
Okay, thanks. Did anyone else want to come back?
Yeah, I just want to say it's actually engineering that has got responsibility for the larger bridges as opposed to street care.
Yeah, Dave, did you want to say something there on that?
Yeah, perhaps if I could come in. Officers have been doing some internal reviews of service functions. And the proposal from April onwards is that the actual inspection regime associated with bridges and structures on the public rights of way will be undertaken by my engineering team through the structures team. It's very small budget, of course. Well, there's no real budget per se. So the unfortunate thing is we will be able to do the inspection work, but where we have structures that will fail public safety access, we would probably need to act accordingly, and then we're going to have to go securing capital funding for the repairs of particularly the larger span, more complex structures. So that's the change. We will probably be, in truth, dipping into our normal revenue and capital funding that's for the bridges team to try and support that work. So we will be doing less work elsewhere across the wider bridges portfolio, but it's unfortunately, the budgetary position that we find ourselves in at the moment. Similarly, and I don't want to prolong this discussion, but the retaining structures on the highway network, there's no specific budget for those, and we dip into the structures budget to do any emergency works that are needed to keep the highways open. So it's a building pressure. They're aging structures. It's not going to go away, and it's something that we just have to risk assess and manage now. So there will be some pain, I expect, over coming years when we have certain failures.
Okay, thanks for the sort of, further information on that one, Dave. That's really helpful. So we'll move on now to ENV 26.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this one relates to specifically the biodiversity team within the countryside and wildlife section, and this is sort of smaller and medium-sized sort of project-based work and a trimming of that particular budget. Members will be aware that the bigger, more substantive schemes tend to be funded via grant bids, grant applications. So this is more of the small scale that you would potentially work with volunteer groups, potentially in terms of sort of making that contribution to the wider sort of nature and climate emergency agendas. So again, it's just a modest trimming to that particular budget, which will perhaps further limit the ability of the team to conduct sort of one-off schemes that within the receiving environment.
Okay, I did have an indication from Councillor Suzanne Patterson on this one. Suzanne, you're on mute, Suzanne.
Thank you, Chair. But my Kerry has answered my question. Thank you.
Fantastic, great, thanks, Kerry. On to 27 then.
Yeah, thank you. Well, perhaps if I take 27 and 28 at the same time, they both relate to the development management service team. And this is sort of, again, initially an increase in fees and charges. The majority of the planning fees and charges are set at a national level, but we do have the ability to look at local fee in terms of non-statutory pre-application fees. And again, this proposal is to have an increase in fees over and above that general uplift of 7.5%. There's also captured in this what would be a total of 5k, a small increase in the income target associated with planning performance agreements. Members will be aware, particularly with the larger, more complex major applications. Okay, all right, thank you. Members will be aware that on the sort of bigger, larger, more complex schemes that are clear are going to be resource intensive. We are quite proactive and have had quite a lot of success, to be fair, in setting sort of planning performance agreements with the developers, with the applicants, so that there's an agreed fee upfront, and on the back of that fee, then we would guarantee a level of support, not just from the planning officers, but from the other specialist areas like environmental health and biodiversity, to support those schemes coming forward. So it's, again, a very small increase. We don't anticipate there's a particular issue with this. I mean, members would be aware that we're going through quite an unprecedented time at the moment with the interest that we've got within Neath Talbot with schemes. So, but inevitably there are no guarantees that will be sustained for a significant period of time. So again, potentially with this one, this could potentially create a long-term pressure, depending on how the interest varies in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry. Yeah, we've got no real guarantee as to what planning applications come in. That's pretty much out of our control. So that's a fair point. There's no indications on this one. So on to the last item, which is ENV 29.
Yeah, this is the last one from me, and this is from specifically the building control section. There was no obvious one place to look within the building control budget sheets. So what officers have done is basically gone through a further process of reviewing each and every budget line, trimming where they can. What has happened historically in the past, that any underspends in these various budget lines that we've looked at tend to be put against any underachievement of income targets. So I suppose indirectly this could create a further pressure, because the building control service, as members again will be aware, I'm sure, that we are competing against two quite aggressive private companies who quite often cream off the sort of the more easier building control work. So it's a constant battle to meet and achieve our income targets in that respect. So it's, again, just adds a little bit more pressure to the team in terms of the budgets.
Okay, there is an indication from Councillor Suzanne Patterson on this item as well. I don't know if your question's been answered, Suzanne.
It has actually, Chair, so thanks for that.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Kerry, for running through those. Did officers want to add anything else to this discussion?
Just to summarise, really, we appreciate that there are a large number of individual budget proposal or budget saving proposals within this appendix in order for us to achieve a balanced budget next year. I don't think many, if any of them, are what we would all like to do. If we could balance the budget without pursuing these saving strategies and these individual pieces of work, no doubt we would be doing it. It's been very, very difficult to achieve this. On top of this, we have got obviously other impacts upon the ability for us to deliver a programme of work going forward, inflation being one of them. So we've got a supplies and services budget. Well, every directorate in the authority has a supplies and service budget, and there are proposals to suppress the inflationary uplift that we would normally get in there. And I think, the impacts on a lot of services will be, we will be able to buy less pens, pencils, paper clips. But the impact upon us is that we would be able to buy less tarmac and less aggregate and less and other building materials that we rely on to do the work to improve the quality of our assets. that is how difficult that it is for us at the moment. We don't have any other savings proposals in our back pocket that we can put before members. This is it, I'm afraid. And it's been very hard to get to this position, and we've had lots of debates as officers as to how we can deliver some of these savings going forward. So I just wanted to explain that it hasn't been easy for us to put these proposals forward to you. And we appreciate it's not going to be easy a decision for members to make when you were considering all these budget proposals going forward. So I just wanted to summarise the position that we're in. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Nicola, and I'm sure members all appreciate how challenging things are. That I've got an indication from Laura, Councillor Williams. Laura.
Hiya, sorry, I've just got a general question around Appendix 7, accommodation review update.
Go ahead.
It's just around the adjusted building opening pattern, opening patterns of the Civic Centre. So it states that due to some nature of the meetings that take place later in the day, political party meetings, training and mayoral appointments could be hosted elsewhere. Will we be accommodated directly in that? So obviously we meet later in the day. I just wanted a bit more elaboration on that.
Thanks. I've actually got a question on accommodation review as well that I'd missed, that I'd asked in a meeting on Monday, so I'll throw that in as well. There's a line in Appendix 7 about reconfiguration of civic buildings to reduce external room hire costs, and there's a target there of 100k saving in the next financial year. I just wanted clarity where that is sitting in the budget at the moment, because it isn't identified in any of the individual budget lines that I could see. So I wasn't sure if that was something additional or whether it was hidden in another line that we hadn't quite seen. So there's another question on Appendix 7. Diolch.
Yeah, I think I'll take those both. Thank you, Chair. So in relation to the first question, that's one of the reasons why closing the civic centres earlier was discounted, was because of the fact that those meetings need to take place in the evening. So it was looked at by Noel Daniel, our Corporate Director for Strategy and Corporate Services, and dismissed as being an option. So that's just a reason why that's not going to progress. So I hope that answers Councillor Williams's question. In terms of the £100,000 room hire, I think what they identified was the fact that where people are hiring external facilities up to the value of £100,000, there may be the opportunity to move that sort of work, those sort of meetings into the civic centre. But at the moment, that 100,000 isn't included as a budget saving because the actual facilities within the civic centre are not available at the moment. So they are being remodelled on the ground floor, but we haven't assumed any saving at the moment because A, we need to wait for the civics to be remodelled. B, we need to see actually whether that those meetings do get moved into the civic centres, because if you look at some of the schedules, some of those meetings are things like parent and toddler clubs and things like that, but they won't be coming into the civic to meet. So I think we're going to monitor the take up of that next year, and then if we do see £100,000 saving or ability to charge to grants, we will then put that into the savings schedule potentially for the following year. So it's not there at the moment.
Thank you. That's really cleared that up. Laura, did you want to come back?
No, I just can't lower my hand.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can't see any other indications from members either, so I'm just gonna go to my little sheet here. So if there's no more indications from members, this report obviously was for the purpose of the consultation, therefore we note the report. And I can also report we have no urgent items today. So that ends the business today. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much for attending, and thanks officers and members for your time this morning. Diolch.
Thanks all.